Welcome to the Jeff Crilley Show. And now, here's Jeff Crilley.
Ladies, welcome to the Jeff Crilley Show.
Thank you.
Awesome. So you have been conducting a long and in-depth study. Why don't we start with you, Dr. Goldman?
Okay. As you know, across the nation, teen birth rates have been dropping consistently at record levels. But here in Dallas, we have some significant problems in a couple of the different zip codes. So specifically, we've been looking at 5 zip codes that have, quadruple the birth rates that we see nationwide. And we've actually had some pretty interesting findings thus far. We found that teens are very open to talking about contraception. They want to know about contraception, and we have definitely found that they don't have the resources to access it. They definitely lack education. Most of them could not even name one source or one discussion that they've had.
Really?
Yes, in their high school experience.
So, Courtney, let's bring you in on this. Is it because the parents just are afraid to talk about it with their kids, or what's happening?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is that the parents don't have the knowledge themselves, and so it's kind of a cycle. And so the parents grow up and they don't get the sexuality education they need, and so they don't have the tools to translate that information to their kiddos. And so there definitely is a lot of fear associated, a lot of shame. Most of the parents we talked to were very open, and they wanted the skill set to be able to talk to their kids. They just didn't know where to get it or where they could learn that information. And so a lot of it is about empowering the parents with the confidence and the skills to have those conversations.
Did you get pushback from parents who say, well, if I talk about contraception, I'm basically giving them permission to have sex?
Yeah. I would definitely say that is the number one concern that parents have when we say, what would you like to talk to your kids about? What do you know about this? They would often say that was the very first thing that they would say. Well, I feel like if I talk to my kids, I'm giving them permission. And studies actually do not support that giving kids valuable information does not increase their sexual activity. And we actually heard the same thing from our teens that said they wish their parents would talk to them earlier and often so that they wouldn't have to come talk to them later on when it might be more embarrassing when they're in a relationship, that they would much rather have the information early, and that was not going to encourage them to engage in earlier sexual activity at all.
Well, this TWU study, were you surprised at the results?
I would not say that we were surprised. I think some of the findings were interesting. It was not surprising that kids don't have the resources that they need. We know that. It was not surprising that the parents need more information. We know that. Some of the surprising findings, I would say, were the social norms around teen pregnancy in some of the areas. So in, say, a zip code that has kids that attend the neighborhood school versus one of the area magnet schools, significant differences in their opinions about teen pregnancy in general or their perceptions of teen pregnancy. So those that are at the neighborhood school, it's a social norm to be pregnant versus, say, a magnet school, nobody's pregnant or very few. So that was surprising.
Courtney, what do you think about some of these reality shows? Do the reality shows make teenage pregnancy seem cool, or do you think they're doing a good job reminding teenage girls that it's not all sunshine and roses having a baby?
I think that's a really mixed bag. I think for some teens who are already in an environment where it's normalized, I think those shows further underline that and show them that, hey, even if I do have a baby, I can make it, and, I could be famous, and, my life will turn out great. And I think what they don't realize is that, this is a very small percentage of girls that it ends up like that for them. I think for a lot of other adolescents, they do see the harsh realities of it, because I think for a lot of these kids, especially that we are working with, they want someone to love them. They see that as their future. And for a lot of them, that college is not a reality, and perhaps, long-term career goals aren't a reality. That's the most that they're hoping for, is that they can have a child at a young age and be a young mom. And so I think a lot of those shows help to show kind of the rough side of that and the financial challenges that a lot of these girls face. Because we do know that only 2% of teen moms graduate college by age 30. And so it really is a tough world out there for them.
What do they call the mechanical babies or robot babies that?
It's called Baby Think It Over.
Yeah, and they're fairly expensive.
They're very expensive. They're about $1,000 a doll to have that. So that is very expensive. It is interesting because when talking with parents, they do feel like if kids that program would be successful, it hasn't been proven to be that successful. Yeah. Yeah, the studies have not been supportive. I think a show like Teen Mom has actually there actually have been some pretty significant studies that show that has delayed and decreased pregnancy amongst the areas where they see that there's a lot of viewership. They have seen a reduction in teen pregnancy in those areas. We can't just point to that, but it definitely is a factor, I think.
What do you think the balance is in between parental responsibility for having this discussion and the school's responsibility?
That's a great question.
Yeah, that is a really good question. I think before we delve into that, it's really important to note that a lot of people assume kids are getting the information at school, and they're not. And so a lot of parents think that. A lot of people just in the community think that. And so everyone kind of points fingers at everyone else and says, okay, well, you're taking care of that, right? And in the end, no one is taking care of it. And so I think depending on who you talk to, there are a lot of people who think it's solely the school's responsibility to educate these kids. And there are some people who would prefer for it to happen in the home. And so I think ideally what we would like to see is it coming from multiple fronts. I mean, there's never something as too much information. And so I think having that at school, but also being able to talk to your parents and being able to approach them, I think is a huge part of it.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it is definitely a community issue and that we should be hitting it from all fronts, which is what the Alliance is doing, so that it is definitely a parent's responsibility, but it is also a responsibility of the schools. It's a responsibility of the community organizations in these areas. I mean, I think we have to have a full-prong approach.
How about churches? Do they play a role at all?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So we actually have been working with quite a few churches, and we're open to working with any that would like to take this on and be able to offer some classes to parents and teens. I think the faith-based community is a huge part of people's lives. I think people look to their pastors, their ministers, their rabbis, et cetera, for guidance, for advice, for mentorship. And I think this is something that the church should talk about, and I think it should be ensconced in their own beliefs and their own values. And that's what we encourage, is provide the evidence-based, medically accurate information, but frame it in your belief system, frame it in your values. And I think kids want that and they need that.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes that one of the teens said, we did focus groups with about 130 teens, and my favorite thing is that everybody is talking about sex, but nobody really talks about sex. So I think, as Courtney said, like in the faith-based communities, it's a perfect place to have real discussions, but framed in the values of the community. It's a perfect solution.
Now, the pregnancy rate has actually gone down. Is that right? What do you attribute that to?
Yeah.
Well, teen birth rates nationally and at the state level have been steadily declining over the last 20 years or so. And so you'll see a lot of news releases, a lot of articles about that. However, Texas is still consistently in the top 5 for having the highest teen birth rate in the country. Dallas's teen birth rate is even worse. And in these zip codes that we are working in, as Dr. Goldman mentioned, they have about 4 to 5 times the national rate. So it's a really, really bad situation. And over the last few years, rates in these specific zip codes and communities have actually been rising. Right. And so that's something that we're looking at. It's kind of contradictory to what's happening nationally.
Right. So just to give an example, like a national birth rate of, say, 24 per 1,000 girls, in some of these zip codes, it's 112 per 1,000.
Wow.
So just to kind of give, a picture to what that looks like.
You feel like the priorities are kind of mixed up, that other programs like childhood obesity or bullying, those are getting more attention?
I think in public health, we like to put things in silos, and I think that's not the right approach. We really should all be working together. And so I think all of these other organizations, whether it be early childhood education, infant mortality prevention, they're all tied together. And by looking at the problem upstream, so prevention, we can prevent all of these other things from ever happening. Because we do know that children of teen mothers are at much higher risk for poor outcomes, whether it be infant mortality, being behind in school, incarceration, et cetera. And so by preventing those pregnancies from ever happening, we also are linking up with all these other groups and helping their causes as well.
Outstanding. What's the website for the Alliance?
Oh, sure. It's NTARuPT.org. So it's NTARuPT.org.
Awesome. And when can we find out more about the study?
We are in the final stages of putting together the report, and it should be released by about the end of the month, say end of May, early June.
Excellent.
So we're excited.
Well, thank you both for being on the Jeff Crilley Show.
Thank you so much.